well, and you're doing that through cues. And then you give some type of formative assessment. All right. So once you give your formative assessments, you see who's doing well, you see who has needs. You are going to find your struggling learners. So what are some ways in which you can support struggling learners within your classroom? And this is our last one. All right, so a lot of people have been put in small groups and differentiated instruction, which is great. I'm to add to this, I'm gonna give you another question that's not up here. How do you do a small group if you're the only teacher in the classroom? What are some ways that you can do that? If you're the only adult instructor in the classroom, how do you do small groups? What do you do with your students who don't necessarily need this? Centers, that's a good one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure how to do Slido, but
Oh, it's fine. You can,
okay.
yeah, you can talk through the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we have these are some ideas. So we have students who are not struggling, but we need to give them some other things to work on. So we have rotations, we have stations, breakout rooms, jigsaw groups. I'm not sure what that is, but I would love to hear about it. If you wrote that, I'm looking at two screens as well. So, but if you wrote jigsaw groups, would you mind sharing what that is?
So jigsaw groups is something that I learned about this past year from my mentor teacher. And basically you have, you divide your whole class into groups. Like say I had 25 kids, I could have 5 groups of 5. And each group starts off with a different topic. Like one could be, I'm blanking on anything right now, but like one could be like precipitation and the other group could be clouds and then the water cycle. And each group looks at something specific. And then you take a kid from each of those groups and put them in a new group together. So you have one person in the group who's an expert on each of the topics, and they come together and create like a jigsaw puzzle with all the different pieces.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's something to take back. And that's one of the good things I love about like teaching and education and getting together in these type of environments, because you always can learn from each other. So thank you for letting me know what that was. I appreciate it. So. All right, so the consensus is we have our small groups, we have our students who we have identified need more assistance. We have our students who are have showed some type of mastery or working towards mastery. All right, so then this is where corrective instruction comes into play. So with corrective instruction, the idea is not to go back and teach it the same exact way that you taught it before. And I mean, obviously, if they didn't get it the first time, they're not going to get it this time. And that's a bad habit, even myself. I have to check myself on. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just try it again. So where I'm going to use instruction, that is something different, just a different approach from what we did before. All right, so after your corrective instruction is done, you move into your second assessment. And again, we're collecting another piece of data that you could use towards progress monitoring. And it's not the same assessment that you gave the first time. And this is just specific for that small group of students that you were working with that needed assistance. So you're doing some different type of problem, different type of question, different type of prompt. And with that, you can help you to verify whether the instruction was successful or if you need to regroup them again to work with them at a later date. All right, so then once again, that's the cycle. So we have our pre-teaching, our whole group instruction, our progress monitoring / formative assessment, our corrective instruction, and then our second assessment, which we administered before we move on to, again, with our new concept and skill, and we start all over again. And then again, as you can see, we have over to the side, our students who have enrichment or extension activities. So one thing I want to note with that is that this is a great time for cross-curricular connections. I know that's one thing that's being pushed, to have like cross-curricular connections within the classroom. So this is one way that you can extend the learning. It also could be a time for independent work, tailored to the student's individual interest, or make it student owned. All right, so we're gonna go into our breakout groups. We're gonna do this for 25 minutes, and I gave you guys a scenario. So the scenario is about 2 5th grade teachers, and they have the same common assessment. In your Jam board groups, which I'm gonna put the link in the chat in just a few minutes, there are 3 questions, and you're gonna discuss the scenario as a breakout group, and you're gonna say what they did well, what could be changed or what should be different, and then you're gonna provide your own suggestions and scenarios. But I'm just gonna go over the scenario for everybody, and then we'll move into our breakout groups. So Mr. Abel and Ms. Harris are both 5th grade teachers who completed a unit on fact and opinion and gave their students a common assessment. 10 of Ms. Harris's students performed poorly on the test. On the next day, she reviewed the test items and solutions with them. Then she retested the 10 students. However, they performed poorly again. Mr. Abel had 8 students who performed poorly on the test. He conducted an item analysis and used the results to plan lessons targeted to their misunderstandings by dividing them into 2 groups. On the next day, he taught 2 different lessons to 2 small groups of 4 students. This time using highlighters for students to determine fact, yellow highlighter, and opinion, blue highlighter for one group, while the other group used a fact and opinion sort. Mr. Abel retested his students with five of the 8 showing mastery of the skill. And I loved all the discussion that I heard. I also went through and looked at some of our responses from the Jam board. So I put some over to the side to discuss, and of course, feel free to unmute yourselves and add anything to these. If I don't review yours and you would like to be personally heard, please, and definitely jump into the, unmute yourself and jump into the discussion. All right, so first was to identify the steps of the corrective instruction cycle from the scenario. And I'm not sure who this group was, this pink group, but I loved how they listed the steps out and what they did. So step 1 is that they tested all the students. Step 2, they didn't analyze their test scores, and they determined the students in need of corrective instruction. And then they proceeded to do the corrective instruction. And here, I'm not sure what group this was. So if this was your group, please feel free to jump in. Harris.
I'm sorry, Joelle. Are you able to share your screen?
Oh, I'm not sharing. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay.
I didn't realize I wasn't sharing. All right. Now you guys can see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I was on this pink sticky note right here. All right, so step 4, they said Harris reviewed what was done wrong, giving correct answers to students. Abel separated students and did 2 different means of review to provide more instruction to students. And then they retested, and reassessed. So good job. They did identify all the steps. Someone else jump in and tell me, did they get anything different? Anything that was missed?
In the
And
scenario,
apparently my camera wasn't on.
in the scenario, it doesn't say that Ms. Harris analyzed the data.
No, it did not say that they analyzed the data. I think they were listing the steps that I talked about previously. Yeah.
It just said that she did have to look at it to see who had missed them. That's, I think, what we were talking about.
So she looked at, yeah, well, look, analyze. Yes, I could see what you're saying. Yeah, so she looked at her
But
scores.
she didn't go into as much depth as the other teacher did.
Correct. There we go. Yes.
She
correct.
went
That is
over
correct.
the correct answers with the students. That's what she did.
Yes. All right. Anybody else have anything they would like to add about the steps that it could identify from the scenario that they pulled out? All right. What are some things that Ms. Harris, and Mr. Abel did well? Let me see. Looking at you guys had a lot of feedback for this one. Let's look at this blue one right here. So something they did well. They both reassessed. Yes, because they could have possibly just moved on and say if you failed, you failed. If you passed, you passed. Great. Mr. Abel used a varied methods of review and used data to plan targeted lessons. Ms. Harris needs to look at the data to specialize for review session. Reteaching seems to be lacking for Ms. Harris students. Yes.
I think.
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I felt like the biggest and most important thing through that whole thing, or that whole process that they went through for these 18 students, was they did a collaborative effort in their corrective method of instruction, where there were 2 teachers, and then they retested or reassessed.
Yeah. Since they are teachers that are working together and they had 2 different groups, what is something that they could have done? Because obviously they had 2 different methods of teaching and they got 2 different results. What is something that they could have did together? Yeah, what is something they could have did together?
He could have taught her class and she could have taught his.
That is one.
So
Yeah, because sometimes a fresh face and a fresh perspective definitely helps some students out. So yeah, that's absolutely right.
And our group mentioned this on the last slide. I mean, we're assuming that they're at the same school, but what they could have done is that one of the teachers could have taken the kids that had mastered the skill already and done an enrichment activity with them. And the other teacher could have worked with the students from both classes that needed to have the reteaching and worked with them.
Yes. That was one thing that was missing from step 1 in the process. Like we never talked about what happened with the other students who, well, I guess we didn't account for them, but the enrichment process.
Well, we talked about peers having those students that were able to excel, have them as peer instructors.
Yeah, and that goes to number 3. What parts are missing of the cycle? So one thing they could have had was peer instruction. That could have been in their when the second time around in the cycle when they're doing their instruction. So what was missed, they could have did peer instruction, or they could have did it differently. And instead of doing the sort on the highlighters, they could have had their peers go in and do some type of peer tutoring as well. Let's see if anything else different. Oh yeah, we just talked about that. There was no mention of enrichment or extension for students who master the concept. No pre-assessment was given, or no whole group instructions was mentioned. That's correct. Let's see. Ms. Harris did not analyze the data. She did not provide targeted remediation. She did not. That is one thing to note. Ms. Harris went straight and retaught the same exact thing and gave the same exact test. So Ms. Harris failed to provide corrective instruction. She did. All right, and this last one I put here intentionally because I wanted to hear from you guys. A lot of y'all have already chimed in and said what you know, what you had thought, your comments, your suggestions, your feedbacks. Is there anybody who hasn't said anything that would like to chime in? Okay. All right. Well, before I go, is there any other questions or comments? All right. Or Dr. Spencer or Bailey?
Okay. I did hear you, Joelle. Yes. So in a second, one of the things that we're going to do right now, we are going to get ready to actually kind of close out. But before we actually close out, if you will, I just want you can stop sharing. You can stop sharing the slide for a second, Joelle. Okay, great. So we're not done. We do have one last activity that we want you to participate in. One of the things that that I'm interested in not just only from a Virginia State standpoint, but also as I'm a part of this initiative with the Virginia New Teacher Support Program and some other initiatives I'm involved on campus, is actually kind of hearing from you. What are your needs and what are your concerns in terms of your assessment needs and the needs that you have? I know that my pre-service teachers are going to have as well. So the feedback that you give also helps me and my other colleagues in other Virginia colleges to kind of figure out what do we need to do, improve in terms of our teaching as well. So we are going to go and provide a last minute survey for you to complete. And we are also going to go through and kind of share those results with you. So we started off our morning, a wonderful Wednesday morning, if you will, but kind of talking about the backdrop or the background of assessment for and learning. We've talked about what it means to teach, to what it means to learn, generally talking about what it means for a general definition of assessment. Dr. Walker presented some information to you about informal assessment, talk about formative assessment and summative assessment. And we also, she went through some Jamboard activity. So this day, we intentionally created this day for you to be as reflective as much as possible. And we feel that when we're presenting, you're furthering your learning by talking and interacting with your colleagues. So we did kind of jump around from room to room just to kind of hear the questions and kind of comments that you have, but also to make sure that you are understanding the directions and things that we've asked. We just finished hearing from Joelle, and she's gone through. She's talked about the section of her presentation was interpreting evidence and impact on student learning, and she talked about mastery learning, and she talked about pre-assessment, initial group instruction, progress monitoring, formative assessment, corrective instruction, second assessment, enrichment and extension activity. So those are just some of the highlights that we have. So in a second, Dr. Walker is actually getting ready to, drop in the chat. She's actually getting ready to drop in a link. And we're going to use this link as one of our final activities. So one of the things with this activity, it only has 4 questions on it. We're asking you to do this anonymously because we want this to be, we want you to be as honest as much as possible with this. So one of the questions that's on the survey is, what is one of your takeaways from today? So your takeaway could be, hey, a lot of this information I've heard before, but it was good reinforcement. A takeaway could be something as simple as you learned a new strategy or a new program from another teacher. So your takeaways are personal to you. And then one of the last questions that we ask actually deals with your needs in terms of what are some further issues that you would like to explore in terms of the issue when it comes to assessment. And I believe that's one question that we want to know just from our own standpoint, just a demographic standpoint, whether you're elementary, middle, or high. So the survey link is in the chat. So please go ahead and click that and start taking that. Okay, so when you open it up, it says, what is one thing or two, if you like, that you can take away from today's discussions and activities? What did we not cover today that you still have questions about? And please provide any additional feedback about today's survey, about today's sessions that you are comfortable in sharing. So one of the things I put in the chat, and I will make sure this is included when you get a copy. So you will get a final copy of the presentation. And if my memory is correct, Bailey, they will also get a copy of the recording as well.
CTA will be, we're going to edit the recordings down a little bit, and they'll be available on our YouTube channel at a later date, probably the end of July, it sounds like.
Okay, good. So in the chat, I did put my email address in, and you'll also get copies of the slide. Is that correct, Bailey?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll share them on our Google Drive and give everyone access.
Okay. So I will. I did put my email address in the chat. I will make sure that's included in that. Dr. Walker, if you want to go ahead and put your email address in, you're more than welcome to. So if you have any other further questions or comments, or you want to know anything else about what happens at Virginia State, or any way that you want it to be involved, or in activities that we do, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. More than welcome to reach out to us as well. So before I all right, so I'm actually getting ready to. All right, so hopefully right now, everyone should be so thank you for your feedback. So feel free to add other things in as well. Hopefully one of the things else that we will try to include as well, the Jamboard responses. We'll figure out some way as to how we can save those responses and make sure that you have access to those. That will also be a part of the material as well. So just as a closeout, if you will, these are some of the takeaways, the scenarios, using examples of good examples of using data intentionally. There's a difference between assessment of and for learning. I appreciate corrective instruction discussion. I learned the best way to use assessment and use them to drive my instruction. The new concept / skill cycle on how important it is for data to influence reteaching. It's often helpful to take a class poll to find out how students would have learned better if I had taught them differently. Make sure to use information I gather adequately, not just reteaching information, but using different strategies to meet my kids where they are. Pre-assessments, using a wide range of assessments. I'm not reading all of these, by the way. Don't get scared. I'm not reading all of these, just kind of highlighting a few. Be purposeful in the process. Importance of evaluating data assessment, reinforcing of information I have heard from my school improvement good, how the timing of assessment within the learning sequence can influence student progress. So those are just some of the reflections, if you will, from question number 1. All right, so I'm just going to go through a couple of the areas that what did we not cover today that you still have questions about. And that's fine too. I think sometimes it's good to leave a presentation wanting to know more questions and wanting to add to what you have. How to not overload our students with pre, during, and post-assessment benchmarks and retesting. So that's another question. I see a couple of people said they feel pretty confident, and they talked about they want to use Bloom cards and more for their sped population. What are some more post-assessments? How to create alternative assessments? How can I specifically phrase questions for students for them to easily understand? Outstanding, because actually, as we know, the art of asking questions and asking questions correctly is definitely an art form, and that is definitely a workshop into of itself. Performance-based assessment and cultural responsiveness, yes. I was just thinking more specific strategies of assessment will be helpful. Good. That's good for us to know. And as we plan to move forward, data analysis, how to use different types of data, use of rubrics. So everything that you have written down here, I definitely agree with, and I definitely understand. And this is good data and information for us as we move forward. Performance assessment, culturally sensitive questions, nothing at this time, interpreting data. So thank you for sharing. I will stop this at this point. So thank you for your honest reflection of today's activities, and thank you for the information, because it will help us to, me in particular, as we plan other professional activities, not only for Virginia State University, but for the other teachers who are in the nearby, in the districts that we serve as well. Okay. Billy, are there any other last minute instructions that we need for tomorrow, or anything else that the participants need to do at this time?
Not at this time, just to come back tomorrow, 10 a.m. again, and we'll get started on another day.
Okay. So tomorrow is the last session, if I'm correct. So
Yes.
we hope that you will be back tomorrow and ready for another day of learning. So please have an enjoyable rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.